There's a moment when you meet a woman you're genuinely interested in. You feel that knot in your stomach. Your breathing slightly quickens. That strange mix of excitement and apprehension. You notice every detail. How she moves her hands when she talks. The way she tilts her head when she listens. That particular sparkle in her eyes when something truly captivates her. Most men, when they feel this connection, do exactly what they've been taught their whole lives. They show immediate interest. They send constant messages, reply in seconds, are always available, give direct compliments, and essentially lay all their cards on the table. They seem honest and authentic on the surface, but what they're really communicating is desperation disguised as interest. And it's precisely in that initial moment that they lose all real possibility. Because excessive early interest, no matter how genuine, is the most effective way to kill any budding attraction. The moment you show her you've already put her on a pedestal, she unconsciously places you beneath it, and that position, once established, rarely changes. In the next 28 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why 90% of men make this fatal mistake in the early days, and how to completely avoid it. By minute 8, you'll understand the invisible psychology that makes this error seem logical, but devastating. By minute 15, you'll learn the exact technique for the first 14 days with specific examples. By minute 22, you'll have the complete system for establishing the right dynamic from the start. Because here's the truth nobody dares to tell you. He who pursues, repels. He who attracts, conquers. If this has already made you question something, like this now and let's move forward together. Think of building a skyscraper as a metaphor. Most people believe what's important is what you see. The impressive facade, the luxurious finishes, the panoramic views. But any architect will tell you that what truly determines if a building will last decades or crumble are the invisible foundations underground. If you make a mistake with the foundations, it doesn't matter how beautiful everything else is. Eventually, it will all come crashing down. And that's exactly what happens in the early days with a woman you're truly interested in. Let me explain exactly where the invisible problem lies that ruins your chances before anything real even begins. The fundamental mistake is so common and so normalized that most people don't even see it as a problem. It's called premature investment, and it has multiple manifestations. It's when you emotionally invest far more than she has invested in you. It manifests in very specific ways, replying to her messages in seconds while she takes hours, being immediately available when she suggests plans, talking about your feelings too soon, giving excessive compliments about her appearance, canceling important plans to see her, or showing that you're memorizing every detail she shares as if it were sacred information. The common man does this because he believes showing intense interest from the start communicates honesty and determination. Result, she feels an invisible pressure, her interest dramatically decreases, and she mysteriously starts to be busy. The strategic man, however, maintains a moderate and calibrated interest during the first few weeks. Result, she feels increasing curiosity, wonders where she stands on his priority list, and starts to invest more to find out. The consequences of premature investment are devastating and unfold in predictable phases. In the short term, you feel conversations become one-sided, your messages get shorter and later replies. Within weeks, you notice you're always the one initiating contact. Within months, if you manage to sustain something, you find yourself in a completely imbalanced relationship where you give 80% and she gives 20%. And the most painful part is you can never blame her for this. You were the one who established this dynamic from day one. The psychological reason for this error goes far beyond simple inexperience. It's rooted in deep cultural conditioning. From childhood, we're bombarded with stories where the hero relentlessly pursues the girl, overcomes all obstacles, and finally she recognizes his worth. Movies, songs, family advice, they all reinforce the same message. If you truly care, you must show absolute interest from the beginning. It's like a novice driver who, upon feeling the car slide on an icy curve, sharply turns the wheel and slams on the brakes. It seems like the logical, intuitive reaction, but any driving instructor will tell you it's exactly the opposite of what you should do. On ice, gentle, sometimes counterintuitive movements are what maintain control. The average woman experiences men who show immediate, excessive interest. She feels overwhelmed, and though she can't quite explain why, the attraction dies. The man who has mastered this, on the other hand, maintains space and mystery initially, She feels free to develop interest naturally, without pressure, and the attraction grows organically. Because genuine interest never needs to be shouted from the rooftops. It reveals itself gradually, like a well-told story. Perhaps you've found yourself writing and rewriting a simple message, overthinking every word to impress her, while she replies with short phrases hours later. Or maybe you remember canceling plans with friends when she spontaneously suggested doing something, only for her to later change her mind without considering your time. You've likely felt that uncontrollable urge to reply immediately when you see her message, no matter where you are or what you're doing. Surely you know the anxiety of seeing she was online, read your message, but didn't reply for hours. Or even today, perhaps you're constantly thinking about someone you barely know, imagining a complete future with a person who hasn't really proven to deserve that mental space. It's like a negotiator who reveals their lowest acceptable price at the start of the conversation. No matter how valuable their product is, they've lost all negotiating power with that simple act. The average man shows all his cards in the first hand. The man who understands human nature reveals his hand gradually, always maintaining a certain mystery. What nobody tells you is that he who establishes the highest value from the start wins the game. But the real cost goes beyond losing that specific person. Every time you follow this pattern, you reinforce a behavior of low self-worth in your psychology. You get used to giving more than you receive, to being available without reciprocity, to pursuing instead of attracting. Over time, this silently erodes your self-confidence from within, creating a cycle where you attract less than you deserve because you've normalized settling for crumbs of attention. Meanwhile, those who keep their value intact during those crucial first few weeks build not only better relationships, but an internal psychology where abundance and self-respect are the norm, not the exception. But identifying the problem is just the beginning. Now I'm going to show you exactly what to do, step by step, with precise examples for those crucial first few days that determine whether you're building something solid or destined for failure. The technique that completely transforms that initial dynamic is called calibrated investment, and it has 5 specific components you must apply during the first 14 days of getting to know someone you're truly interested in. First, you consciously establish a communication pace that is slightly less frequent than hers. If she takes 2 hours to reply, you wait 3 or 4. Naturally, not calculatingly. This creates a pattern where she begins to anticipate your replies. Second, you maintain a level of personal revelation equivalent to hers. If she shares something personal, you reciprocate with something of similar depth. No more, no less. Third, you show interest through quality attention, not quantity. When you're together, you're completely present, but your time is visibly valuable. Fourth, you allow the space between interactions to generate curiosity. Silences are not your enemy. They are your strategic ally. Finally, you calibrate your compliments so they are specific and infrequent, focused on choices she makes, not attributes she merely possesses. Most people act with anxious, abundant energy, bombarding with constant attention from the start. You, however, must act with calm, controlled energy, rationing your presence with strategic precision. The difference isn't subtle, it's fundamental. He who masters the beginning rarely needs to pursue later. Imagine you just got the number of a woman you found really interesting after a conversation at a networking event. You exchanged contacts, and there was that undeniable spark of mutual interest. Most men would text her that same night, "Hey, it was great meeting you today. We should grab coffee sometime soon." Then he'd be glued to his phone, checking every few minutes to see if she replied. If she takes hours to reply with a simple, "Yeah, that'd be nice," he immediately suggests a day, time, and place, showing complete availability. It seems proactive, but it actually communicates that he has nothing more important in his life than this new possibility. But you wait until the next day. You text her something brief but meaningful that shows you paid attention. That urban sustainability project you mentioned sounded interesting. Nothing more. No questions, no proposals, no excessive emojis. When she replies, and she will, precisely because you're not pushing for a response, you wait a few hours before continuing the conversation. You don't immediately suggest plans. You let 2 to 3 more exchanges happen where you demonstrate value and selective interest. When you finally suggest meeting up, you do it by offering 2 specific options instead of open availability. "I'll be near Condesa on Thursday afternoon or Friday around noon." Would you like to continue this conversation over a drink at one of those times? The dynamic is already established. She perceives she's dealing with someone who has a structured, valuable life where she could fit in, but she'll have to earn her place. The emotional investment starts flowing in the right direction, because he who seems like he can lose everything usually does. He who can walk away calmly usually stays. Now imagine you're already on that first date. You're at an interesting cafe, the conversation flows naturally, and you feel that connection growing. Most men, excited by how things are going, start to oversell themselves. They talk too much about their accomplishments, interrupt to tell their own stories, give multiple physical compliments, and even worse, they reveal all their interest. You know, I really like you. I don't meet many women like you. It seems honest and vulnerable, but it's actually giving away all evaluative power. You, on the other hand, maintain a 70-30 ratio. She talks 70%, you 30%. You ask questions that genuinely interest you, not just to fill silences. When she shares something personal, you reciprocate with something similar, creating balanced intimacy. Your compliments are specific and behavioral. I like how you analyze that situation. It shows a unique perspective. You don't show all your interest. Instead, you make it clear that you're evaluating compatibility, just as she is evaluating you. The most powerful thing, after a reasonable amount of time, you're the one who ends the date first, even when it's going well. This has been really interesting. I have to prepare some things for tomorrow, but I'd like to continue this conversation another day. You've created a pattern where she's left thinking about you, not the other way around. The emotional investment starts to balance naturally. In the digital environment, these principles become even more critical. Social media and messaging apps create a false sense of accelerated intimacy that amplifies this initial mistake. When you start following someone you're interested in on Instagram, most people immediately react to all their stories, like old photos, and comment excessively. They become devoted spectators of her content while she barely registers their existence. This establishes a fan-celebrity dynamic that's impossible to reverse. You, however, interact strategically. Perhaps you like an occasional post that genuinely interests you, but not everything. You reply to a specific story with an intelligent comment when you genuinely have something to contribute, not just to make your presence known. More importantly, you maintain your own interesting and independent content. Your life doesn't stop because someone new appeared. In direct messages, you apply the same calibration. If she sends short messages, you don't reply with paragraphs. If she disappears for hours, you're not anxiously waiting. You maintain the same energy she offers, perhaps a little less, creating a subtle vacuum that she naturally wants to fill. Because in the digital world, he who seems to have less need for instant validation always has more real power of connection. But be warned, there are 3 critical mistakes that can sabotage this technique, even if you understand the general concept. The first mistake is confusing calibration with manipulative games. This happens when you artificially calculate every reply with a stopwatch in hand, or follow rigid rules, like wait twice as long as she took. Result: your communication feels mechanical and inauthentic. It seems strategic, but is actually just manipulative. The correction is to maintain natural proportionality, not exact mathematical precision. Second mistake, oscillating between extremes. Many start with calibrated distance, but then, at any positive sign from her, abruptly switch to excessive investment. This creates confusion and distrust, because nobody respects someone who lacks consistency. To avoid this, visualize attraction as a thermostat you adjust gradually, not an on-off switch. Third mistake, the most subtle and dangerous, calibrating externally while still over-investing internally. This is treacherous, because while you appear calm in your actions, your mind remains completely focused on her, building future scenarios, interpreting her every word, and essentially living in a world where she's already central. If you find yourself constantly thinking about someone you barely know, immediately redirect that energy towards your own priorities and purposes. Everything we've covered works perfectly on a practical level, but there's a much deeper dimension that transforms this from a simple technique into true understanding. Let's explore the fundamental truth that completely changes how we view these initial dynamics. Most men operate under a fundamental illusion about female attraction. We've been conditioned to believe that showing direct and constant romantic interest is the way to a woman's heart. That if we truly want someone, we must fight for her, show her how much we care, and essentially convince her to choose us through persistence and effort. But when you look closer at real human psychology, you notice something strangely contradictory. The very women who say they want men who will go after them consistently lose interest precisely in those who do exactly that. And this isn't hypocrisy or confusion. It's simply that there's a disconnect between what we intellectually believe we want and how our emotional biology truly functions. The counterintuitive truth is that female attraction doesn't grow through direct pursuit. It grows through space and dynamic tension. It's not that women don't want to be valued. It's that the perceived value of something is directly related to its scarcity and the effort required to obtain it. This isn't manipulation. It's simply basic human psychology that applies to everyone, men and women alike. It's like the paradox of oxygen in our bodies. We constantly need it, but we never think about it until it's momentarily scarce. Only then do we recognize its true value. In the same way, your attention and interest are invaluable, but only when they exist within a framework of relative scarcity, because what is obtained without effort is rarely fully valued. Let me tell you something personal that completely changed my understanding of this principle. For years, I repeated the same pattern. I'd meet someone interesting, feel a connection, and automatically reorganize my entire life to make space for this new person. I'd reply to messages instantly no matter where I was, cancel plans with friends when she suggested meeting, and basically communicate "you are already my priority" when we barely knew each other. Invariably, the result was the same. Initial interest followed by a gradual but inevitable cooling off. Frustration led me to deeply study these dynamics, consulting both with close women and with men who naturally succeeded in their relationships. The discovery was eye-opening. My friend Claudia confessed something to me I'll never forget. The guy I was most interested in my life was the one I could never quite tell exactly how interested he was in me. It wasn't that he was indifferent, he showed clear interest, but I always felt like I had to fully earn his attention. This pattern repeated consistently across different cultures and contexts. It wasn't about games or manipulation. It was about the fundamental nature of how human valuation works. I personally experienced the transformation when applying this understanding. The same woman who had previously shown moderate interest suddenly started consistently initiating contact when she sensed that my attention wasn't fully guaranteed. Have you noticed that we always desire what we're not sure we can have more? Observe how, in any social group, the most interesting people are those whose approval isn't guaranteed. Even in friendships, we value those who have clear standards about their time and attention more. Think about that time you met someone and felt like you had to earn their full interest. How did you feel? More engaged and interested or less? That feeling of having earned something valuable through your own merit, not simply because you were available, is exactly what we're cultivating. True attraction never stems from absolute certainty. It arises from the space between certainty and possibility. To truly internalize this principle, you need a fundamental transformation in how you perceive your own value. It's not about superficial techniques, but a profound shift in mindset. Before, you thought your interest and attention were instruments to gain affection, resources to invest expecting a return. Now you understand that your interest and attention are valuable treasures that must be earned gradually, not prematurely granted based on unproven potential. When you truly assimilate this shift, you start noticing clear signs. You no longer feel that internal compulsion to immediately reply to every message. It's not that you force yourself to wait. You simply no longer feel artificial urgency. You don't excessively plan future interactions with someone you barely know. You find yourself genuinely evaluating compatibility instead of desperately seeking approval. The dynamics of your interactions balance naturally, without conscious effort. And, most importantly, you start attracting people who truly value what you offer because you've clearly established that it has real worth. Someone who has completely mastered this principle doesn't think in terms of techniques to maintain interest at all. He operates from an internal reality where his time, attention, and emotional presence are naturally valuable and must be earned progressively. He doesn't need to remind himself to maintain calibrated distance. His internal value system naturally creates those boundaries without conscious effort. He who understands this deeply never needs to pursue. He simply creates conditions where others naturally desire to approach him. Now that you understand both the problem and the fundamental principle, it's time to give you a complete and structured system. The practical tools, the specific plan, and the detailed roadmap to completely transform how you initiate any potential relationship from now on. The first fundamental tool is called the selective scarcity framework. Basically, you establish from the beginning that your time and attention are valuable resources that you allocate consciously, not by default. You use this specifically when you feel that initial urge to reorganize your whole life around someone new, when you find yourself constantly checking your phone, or when you notice you're more emotionally invested than she is. Here's how it works in detail. First, you consciously identify the non-negotiable areas of your life: work, workouts, time with close friends, personal projects. Then you clearly establish, for both yourself and her, that those areas maintain their priority while you explore this new connection. Finally, you communicate this not with words, but with consistent actions. For example, when she spontaneously suggests meeting at a time that interferes with something important, you reply exactly, "I have an important commitment that afternoon. I could do Thursday at 7 or Friday afternoon." You don't apologize or over-explain. The effect is immediate. She recognizes she's dealing with someone who values his own time, and paradoxically, she desires more of that time precisely because it's not unconditionally available. The second essential tool is the proportional investment mirror. This technique allows you to calibrate exactly how much emotional investment to make at each stage of the relationship, avoiding the fatal imbalance that destroys attraction. You use it in every interaction, especially in messages, date planning, and personal revelations. Implementing it requires conscious observation. You notice the level of investment she demonstrates, the length of her messages, the promptness of her replies, the willingness to make plans, the depth of what she shares. Then you consciously match or maintain a slightly lower level, 10–20% of investment. If she writes paragraphs, you don't reply with monosyllables, but you don't write essays either. If she shares something personal, you reciprocate with something similar, creating gradual intimacy. For example, if after a good first date she sends an enthusiastic message, you reply with similar but slightly more contained energy. "I enjoyed meeting you too. Your perspective on specific things she mentioned was particularly interesting." Calibrated reciprocity creates a dynamic where she constantly wonders where she stands with you, motivating her to invest more to find out. The third transformative tool is the active valuation system. This technique completely reverses the traditional dynamic where the man pursues and the woman evaluates. You implement it from the very beginning, and it continues throughout the entire initial phase. It requires a fundamental mental shift. Instead of asking yourself, "Does she like me?" you consistently ask yourself, "Do I like what I'm seeing so far?" You specifically observe how she treats others, her consistency between words and actions, how she handles disagreements, and if she respects your boundaries. You subtly communicate this evaluative mindset through comments like, "I like that you're punctual. That's something I really value." Or, "I appreciate how you treat the restaurant staff. That says a lot about a person." This active valuation creates a dynamic where she unconsciously begins to seek your approval instead of the contrary. Because he who openly evaluates rarely needs to anxiously impress. Now I'm going to give you a surgical plan for the next 7 days. It's not theory. It's a specific protocol that transforms the dynamic from the start. For the first 2 days, your sole focus is implementing the selective scarcity framework. Don't try everything at once, just this. Every time you feel that urge to immediately reply to a message, rearrange your schedule to accommodate her, or cancel something important for the chance to see her, and this will happen at least 3 times in these 2 days. Consciously apply the valuation of your time. No matter the context, whether it's someone new or someone you're already dating, in person or digital. What you'll notice: internal resistance on day 1. You'll feel anxious, worried that your lack of immediate availability will be interpreted as disinterest. But on day 2, you'll observe something fascinating: more engaged responses and effort to adapt to your availability. People will begin to value your moments of attention more precisely because they are not guaranteed. Pay special attention to how the tone of communication changes when you establish that your time has inherent value. On days 3 and 4, you add the proportional investment mirror while maintaining the first tool. Now you're implementing 2 techniques simultaneously. When exchanging messages or in person, you not only protect your time and priorities, but you also consciously calibrate your level of emotional investment to match or be slightly less than hers. The combination creates a synergistic effect where she unconsciously begins to invest more to balance the scales. Here the game visibly changes because you activate the psychological principle of balanced reciprocity. You'll notice that you start feeling less anxiety about where the relationship stands, that she initiates contact more frequently, and mainly that the dynamic feels more natural and less forced. If you feel uncomfortable not giving your all as you were taught you should, it's a sign that it's working. Adjust the calibration if you notice it's cooling off too much. This is a dance, not a rigid formula. Days 5, 6, and 7 are for refinement and integration of the third tool, completing the system. Now you operate with the complete protocol. If she shows moderate interest, you maintain selective scarcity and proportional mirroring. If she increases her emotional investment, you add active valuation to calibrate the dynamic. If you detect imbalance, you immediately adjust using the appropriate tool. Specifically observe how her body language changes, how the frequency with which she initiates contact increases, how she starts to adapt to your availability. Adjust your behavior based on these signals. If you notice overcompensation where she seems to lose interest, it means you've calibrated too low and need to show more genuine but selective interest. At this point, you'll experience a completely different sensation in your interactions. It's not imagination. It's the observable result of having correctly established the dynamic from the beginning. But pay maximum attention now, because there are 3 critical mistakes that can destroy everything you've built, even if you perfectly apply these techniques. Mistake number 1, confusing self-worth with toxic inaccessibility. It seems subtly similar but is fundamentally destructive. It occurs especially when you start seeing positive results and take it to the extreme. The sign that you're falling into this is that you start feeling satisfied when she shows frustration or anxiety about your lack of availability. Immediate consequence: you create a dynamic of insecurity that only attracts people with problematic attachment patterns. Long-term consequence: you attract dysfunctional relationships based on power games, not genuine connection. The precise correction is to remember that the goal is valued balance, not emotional manipulation. You value your time while still being reliable and present when you choose to be. Mistake 2, falling into the reactive pendulum. This error arises when you alternate between extremes. Overinvestment followed by exaggerated distance when you feel vulnerable. It happens particularly after moments of real intimacy, when the fear of losing control makes you abruptly pull back. The indicator is noticeable inconsistency in your behavior. Result: she detects emotional instability, not strength. The solution is to maintain calibrated consistency. Small, gradual adjustments, not dramatic swings. Mistake 3, the most dangerous and subtle: converting psychological principles into a negative belief system. This error occurs when you internalize these techniques not as tools to establish healthy dynamics, but as proof that all women are shallow or true love doesn't exist. It's treacherous because it disguises itself as realism while destroying your capacity for genuine connection. If you find yourself becoming cynical or using these tools to confirm negative views on relationships, stop immediately. These techniques are bridges to more authentic connections, not walls to prevent them. A well-implemented system builds foundations for relationships of mutual respect, not temporary manipulations. And before I finish, I want to give you the most important thing of all, the element that defines whether you'll truly transform your relationships or simply collect more theory. So let's recap, but not as a tedious summary. I'm going to give you the 4 pillars that now define how you initiate any relationship with real potential. First pillar: premature emotional investment is the fatal mistake that silently destroys attraction before it can develop, establishing an imbalanced dynamic impossible to reverse later. Second pillar: the calibrated investment technique allows you to maintain genuine interest while establishing self-worth, creating a balance where attraction naturally grows in both directions without desperate pursuit. Third pillar: true attraction doesn't grow through unconditional availability but through gradual valuation. When your attention is earned progressively, its perceived value increases exponentially, activating genuine interest. Fourth pillar: the integrated system of selective scarcity, proportional mirroring, and active valuation creates a relational architecture where mutual respect and sustainable attraction are the natural, not exceptional foundations. These 4 pillars are not abstract theory. They are the practical architecture that determines whether you build on sand or solid rock. He who establishes value from the start rarely has to prove it later. Now comes your challenge, and it starts exactly in the next 24 hours. Not tomorrow, not next week, in the next day. During this period, a situation is guaranteed to arise where you'll feel that urge for premature investment. It could be with someone you just met, someone you're starting to date, or even in an established relationship. But it will happen. When it happens, and you'll know exactly because you'll feel that familiar urge to immediately reply, cancel plans out of availability, or show more interest than you're receiving, I want you to consciously apply the selective scarcity framework, not a diluted or theoretical version, exactly as I explained it to you. You don't need to announce that you're trying something new. You don't need to explain your behavior. That's the beauty of the system. Simply value your time consciously, keep your priorities intact, and carefully observe what happens. Because when you do this, three things will inevitably occur. You'll notice an immediate change in how you respond internally to the situation. You'll observe a subtle but significant reorientation in the external dynamic, and you'll personally confirm that these principles are not arbitrary theory, but fundamental psychological laws. This is your ignition moment, your chance to prove to yourself, not to me, not to others, but to yourself, that this truly transforms interactions from the root. And after implementing it, come back and tell me specifically how the dynamic changed. I want to know exactly what you noticed differently in both yourself and the other person. And now, the password. If you've reached this point in the video and have truly absorbed these transformative principles, comment exactly this, word for word. Solid foundations, inevitable results. This isn't just a comment, it's identification. It's code. It shows that you didn't just watch 28 minutes of content, but that you understood the transformative essence. That you're not part of the majority who passively consume and immediately forget. You're part of the architects, those who build relationships based on solid foundations, not desperate improvisation. This is our password, our shared protocol. I'll read every comment and know exactly who truly understood and who just skimmed over it. Comment now. And since you've made it to the end, there's something important I need to share with you. In the next video, I'm going to show you the complementary system to this one. How to maintain that initial attraction once it's correctly established. It's about the critical balance between security and mystery that few men master. It involves the concept of polarized tension and explains why so many relationships that start incredibly end in boredom or disinterest after months. But that's a topic for the next installment. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. The next video comes out in exactly 1 week. Remember the building metaphor I mentioned at the beginning? We talked about how most people obsessively focus on the visible facade while ignoring the fundamental foundations. Now you fully understand. It's not simply about avoiding initial mistakes. It's about establishing a relational architecture where sustainable attraction is the natural outcome, not the exception. You no longer need to desperately pursue. You've learned to build foundations where others naturally desire to approach you. When you establish value from the start, you rarely need to prove it later. Now start building, on rock, not on sand.